The moment Ethan stepped into the house, everything felt wrong. It was so quiet, like the house was holding its breath. He could only hear his heart pounding in his ears. Something bad had happened. He just knew it. Lila. He called, his voice breaking the silence. But no one answered. No footsteps, no giggles, no sounds at all. It was too quiet. He called her name again, louder this time, but still no answer. Then he heard something, a soft sound like a whisper. It came from down the hall, near the kitchen. He ran toward it, his feet moving faster with every step. When he reached the kitchen, he stopped suddenly. On the cold floor, on an old, thin blanket, lay his little girl, Lila. She was curled up, so still that he thought she wasn't breathing. Her skin was pale, and her tiny arms and legs were covered in bruises. Her lips were a scary shade of blue, and her eyes were half open, but didn't seem to see him. Lila, he whispered, falling to his knees beside her. His throat felt tight, like he couldn't speak. He touched her cheek. It was ice cold. Her body was so light and fragile, like a bird's wing. When his hand touched her, she gave a tiny shiver, and her eyes moved to look at him. Slowly, very slowly, a little bit of life came back to her gaze. "Daddy," she whispered. Her voice was so soft he could barely hear it. "I'm here, baby. I'm here," Ethan said, gently picking her up in his arms. She felt so thin and small in his strong hands. He held her close, feeling her trembling against him. Her breathing was shallow, each breath sounding like it hurt. Ethan couldn't stop the tears from coming. He held her tighter, his mind racing with questions. This wasn't how things were supposed to be. This wasn't the home he'd dreamed of coming back to. "Who did this to you, Lila?" he asked, his voice shaking. Lila didn't answer. Her little face scrunched up, and she turned away from him, curling up even smaller, like she was scared to talk. Ethan's heart broke into a million pieces. He was her dad. She shouldn't be scared to tell him anything. "Was it your mom?" he asked softly, though anger bubbled inside him. Lila didn't say anything, but looked toward the door. She pressed her lips together, like she was scared to say too much. Ethan took a deep breath, trying to stay calm for her. "How long have you been sleeping here, baby?" he asked, looking at the thin blanket on the hard kitchen floor. Lila looked down and whispered, "A while. I don't know. They said I didn't deserve anything better." Her words hit Ethan like a punch to the stomach. They had treated his little girl like this, his sweet, innocent Lila. He had fought in a war, faced the worst dangers, and dreamed every day of coming back to her, only to find her like this. "Oh, Lila," he murmured, holding her even closer. "I'm here now, and I'm never leaving you again." For the first time, a tiny flicker of hope appeared in Lila's sad eyes. She reached up and touched his face with her small hand. "You're not leaving again?" she asked, her voice trembling. Ethan kissed her forehead gently. "I promise, baby. I'm here, and I'm not going anywhere." Lila leaned against him, and for a moment, it was like she believed him. But Ethan needed to know more. He needed to understand everything that had happened while he was gone. "Tell me everything, sweetheart," he said gently. "I need to know what happened." Lila hesitated, her little face filled with worry. Slowly, she began to speak, her voice trembling as she told him about the last few years. She told him how things had changed after he left for the war. At first, everything seemed fine. Lila had tried to fit in with her new step-family. She had played with Sienna, her older stepsister, and even tried to make friends with Owen, her stepbrother, who was always quiet and distant. But as time passed, Sienna started pulling away. She wanted her own space and didn't want Lila around as much. Lila had tried to respect that, but one day, she accidentally walked into Sienna's room while she was with a boy. Sienna got very angry and yelled at her, telling her to stay out and saying mean things like, "I wish you would just go away." Lila had run to her stepmom, Helen, for comfort, hoping she'd understand. But Helen didn't. She told Lila that Sienna needed her space and that Lila was being too sensitive. After that, things got worse. Sienna started being mean on purpose, slamming doors in Lila's face, throwing things at her, and whispering cruel words when no one else was around. Even Owen joined in sometimes, teasing her or pushing her aside. But the worst part, Lila said, was how Helen treated her. Helen ignored her most of the time, only paying attention to her own kids. At meals, Lila was often left out. In her own home, she felt like a stranger. "Daddy," Lila whispered, tears falling down her cheeks. "I try to be good. I thought if I was good enough, maybe they'd like me." But they didn't. Ethan's heart ached as he listened. His little girl had been so brave, trying so hard to belong in a family that didn't treat her right. Then Lila told him about the day everything changed. One morning, there was a knock on the door. A soldier came to tell Helen that Ethan had died in the war. Lila had overheard everything. She had felt her whole world crumble. Her dad, the one person who loved her no matter what, was gone. After that, things got even worse. Helen and the others treated Lila like she didn't matter at all. They told her she didn't deserve a warm bed or nice clothes. They made her feel small and unwanted. Listening to Lila's story, Ethan's anger grew. He had trusted Helen to take care of their family, but instead, she had let this happen. "Don't worry, baby," he said, holding her close. "I'm here now, and I won't let anyone hurt you again. You're safe with me." Lila looked up at him, her eyes filled with hope and love. For the first time in a long time, she smiled, a small, shaky smile, but a smile nonetheless. Ethan knew he had a lot to do to make things right. When the letters stopped arriving, Helen's true feelings came out. The kind smiles from the neighbors faded away, and so did Helen's act of being kind. Then one day, a letter from the government arrived with a big check. It was money for Helen because Ethan, Lila's father, had died while serving as a soldier. That check changed everything. Helen's kindness disappeared, and she started treating Lila with coldness and anger. It was like Lila had become invisible in the house, a shadow that Helen didn't want to see. One evening, as Lila washed the dishes, Helen came into the kitchen. Her voice was sharp and mean as she said, "This isn't your home anymore. Don't think for a second that anyone wants you here." The words hurt, but Lila kept quiet. She scrubbed the plates with her sore, red hands. She quickly learned to stay silent, to keep her head down, and to not be seen or heard. Helen's dislike for Lila grew stronger every day, and soon, her step-siblings, Sienna and Owen, joined in. Sienna, who used to smile kindly, now sneered at Lila. Owen, who had once ignored her, became cruel. They gave her chores, made her run errands, and scolded her for every little thing. Lila cleaned floors, dusted shelves, and washed clothes all day long. Sometimes, after ironing the clothes, they'd mess them up and make her do it all over again. At meals, Lila was often left with scraps. She wasn't allowed to sit at the table. If she tried, Owen would push her chair away, laughing. "You're lucky we even let you stay here," he said once. Lila would eat alone in the corner of the kitchen, her heart heavy with sadness. Every night, after finishing all the chores, Lila would lie down on her small, cold bed in the corner of the house. Her blanket was thin and didn't keep her warm. In the dark, she would cry softly, thinking of her father. She missed him so much. She remembered how he used to hug her and tell her she was loved. She held on to those memories tightly because they gave her a little bit of comfort. But every morning, the harsh reality returned. Helen was cold. Sienna was mean. Owen was cruel. Lila couldn't escape it. One afternoon, as Lila tried to pass Sienna in the hallway, Sienna blocked her way. "Look at you," she said, her voice filled with scorn. "You don't belong here. You're pathetic." Sienna's friends laughed along with her. "Sometimes I think we should just leave her outside with the trash," Sienna added with a smirk. The words were like a punch to Lila's heart, but she stayed silent. She knew that talking back would only make things worse. At night, Sienna would kick Lila out of the shared bedroom, telling her she had no right to be there. Lila would end up sleeping on the cold floor outside, with only her thin blanket. But it was Owen who made Lila feel truly unsafe. One evening, when Helen was out, Owen cornered Lila in the kitchen. He grabbed her arm tightly and sneered. "Why don't you ever look at me?" "Huh?" Lila winced in pain, but looked him in the eye. "Let go of me," she said, her voice shaky but brave. Owen laughed darkly. "Or what? You're a useless little rat. Nobody cares about you." Lila's anger flared. "Stay away from me," she said, her hands clenched into fists. "You're just a coward who picks on someone smaller." Owen's face twisted with anger. He shoved her hard against the counter, making her cry out in pain. Lila's lip bled, but she didn't look away. "Is that all you've got?" she whispered, refusing to let him see her fear. Owen slapped her across the face hard. She fell to the floor, her cheek burning, but she didn't cry. She wouldn't give him the satisfaction. Owen glared down at her and said, "Don't tell anyone about this. If you do, I'll make your life worse than it already is." From that night on, Lila's fear of Owen grew. She avoided him, Sienna, and Helen as much as possible. But no matter how hard she tried to stay invisible, their cruelty followed her everywhere. One morning, as Lila swept the driveway, Iris, their new neighbor, noticed her. Iris was an older woman who liked to sit on her porch and watch the neighborhood. She had seen Lila working in the yard many times, carrying heavy bags or rushing down the sidewalk with her head down. Today, she saw the bruises on Lila's arms and how tired and sad the girl looked. Iris put down her gardening tools and walked over to Lila. "Good morning, Lila," she said kindly. Lila looked up in surprise. She wasn't used to anyone speaking to her kindly anymore. Lila was sweeping her porch when her neighbor, Iris, walked over. Iris smiled gently. "You look so tired, dear. Why don't you come over for some tea? I just made a fresh pot." Lila hesitated, holding on to her broom like it was keeping her steady. She glanced nervously at her house, worried someone might be watching. I don't think I can," she whispered. Iris noticed Lila's fear, but didn't give up. She spoke kindly, "Just a quick break. A little rest won't hurt, will it?" After a moment, Lila gave a small nod and followed Iris across the street. She walked slowly, like she was afraid someone might yell at her any moment. When they got to Iris's kitchen, the room felt warm and cozy. It smelled like tea and fresh scones. Iris poured some tea and pushed a plate of scones toward Lila. "Go ahead, sweetheart. Have one," she said gently. Lila reached out shyly, taking a scone. She ate it slowly, savoring the sweetness she hadn't tasted in so long. Iris noticed the bruises on Lila's wrists and the tired look in her eyes. She seemed scared, always glancing at the door like she was expecting trouble. "Lila," Iris said softly, "is everything okay at home?" Lila froze, the scone halfway to her mouth. She stared at her lap, fidgeting with her fingers. "I'm fine," she whispered, but her voice didn't sound convincing, even to herself. Iris didn't push. "Well," she said gently, "if you ever need to talk, I'm right here. My door's always open." Lila smiled faintly, the first bit of warmth she'd felt in a long time. She didn't say much, but when she left Iris's house, she felt a little lighter. Over the next few weeks, Iris continued to be kind. She'd leave cookies on Lila's porch or invite her over for small chats. Slowly, Lila started trusting Iris, drawn to her warmth. One evening, as they watered Iris's plants, Lila finally spoke. "Mrs. Iris, you're very kind. I don't understand why you're so nice to me." Iris paused and looked at her with soft eyes. "Because everyone deserves kindness, Lila, especially those who need it the most." Lila's eyes filled with tears. She had been told so often that she didn't matter, that she was a burden. But Iris made her feel cared for, something she hadn't felt in years. Meanwhile, Ethan stood in his house, thinking about what his daughter, Lila, had told him. She had been treated badly while he was away, and it hurt him deeply. He had been a strong soldier, but now he felt weak knowing how much his daughter had suffered. He made up his mind. No more pretending. He would make things right. Ethan began moving through the house. He dragged Helen's, Sienna's, and Owen's beds out onto the front lawn. He added their dressers and clothes, leaving everything outside for them to see. By the time he was done, the sun was rising, casting a pale light over the yard. Hours later, a car pulled up. Helen stepped out, followed by Sienna and Owen. They all looked shocked to see Ethan. "Ethan," Helen called out with a fake smile, walking toward him. "You're alive. We were so worried about you." Sienna added, "We thought you were gone." "It's so good to see you, Dad." Ethan didn't move. When Helen tried to hug him, he stopped her with a firm hand. "I wouldn't be happy if I were you, Helen." Helen's smile faltered. "What's wrong, Ethan? Aren't you glad to be home?" Ethan's voice was cold. "You seem awfully disappointed that I'm alive." Helen flinched, her eyes darting to the yard where all their belongings lay. What's going on? She asked nervously. Ethan crossed his arms. That's your new living arrangement, he said. I thought you might like a taste of what you put Lila through. At Lila's name, everyone went silent. Helen tried to act innocent. Ethan, I don't know what you're talking about. Lila's just sensitive. You know how she is. Don't you dare call her sensitive, Ethan snapped. I know exactly what happened here. Every bruise, every harsh word. I know how you treated my daughter. Helen tried to defend herself. It wasn't easy raising 3 kids alone, Ethan. Lila wouldn't listen. Enough! Ethan interrupted. You had a choice, Helen. Every time you hurt her or ignored her, you made a choice. And now you're going to live with the consequences. Helen tried again. Ethan, please. This is our home. We're family. Ethan laughed bitterly. Family? You call this family? Family doesn't treat each other like garbage. You turn to all 3 of them. Here's how it's going to be. You'll live outside with the things on the lawn. Maybe then you'll understand how Lila felt. Helen, Sienna, and Owen stared at him in shock, realizing there was no way to talk their way out of this. For the first time, they understood they couldn't escape the truth. Helen's face twisted in anger. You can't be serious. I won't live like this. I'm your wife, and this is our home. Ethan's voice was sharp. Not anymore. Not for you, not for them. You can stay in the garage or leave. Sienna's voice trembled, her panic clear. Dad, this is crazy. We didn't do anything wrong. Lila is just making things up. Ethan's eyes turned to her, filled with disappointment. No, Sienna, you and your mother may lie, but Lila doesn't know how to do that. She still has a heart, and you broke it. Owen, finally unable to hold back, growled, You're punishing us for nothing, for some kid's lies. You'll regret this. Ethan didn't flinch. The only regret I have is leaving her with you. Helen, realizing she couldn't change his mind, glared at him. You think you can just throw us out? I'll take you to court. I'll take everything. Ethan's voice was calm, but firm. Try it. I've got proof of what you've done. You think I didn't document Lila's injuries? You won't win this time, Helen. Not against me. Not against my daughter. Helen's face fell. She knew he was serious. Grabbing her purse, she gestured to Sienna and Owen. Let's go, she spat, storming toward the door. Before they could leave, Ethan stopped them with one last warning. When you walk out, don't come back. And if you ever try to hurt Lila again, I'll make sure the law deals with you. Helen muttered angrily as they left. Sienna looked over her shoulder nervously, while Owen's face showed quiet, simmering rage. When the door closed, the house felt lighter, quieter. Ethan took a deep breath. For the first time in months, he felt peace. Lila stood in the doorway, her eyes wide. She couldn't believe what had just happened. Ethan knelt down and gently held her hands. They're gone, sweetheart, he said softly. They won't hurt you anymore. Lila's lip trembled, and she threw her arms around him, hugging him tightly. Ethan held her close, her small heartbeat giving him hope. He knew this was the beginning of their healing. In the days that followed, the house felt peaceful again. Ethan focused all his energy on making Lila feel safe and loved. Slowly, she started to smile and trust again. Iris, their neighbor, noticed the changes. She often came by with homemade pies or freshly baked bread. Her kindness brought warmth to their home. One day, Iris invited Lila to help plant tulips in her garden. Lila pressed bulbs into the soil with her small hands, watching Iris's gentle movements. You know, Iris said with a kind smile, brushing dirt off her hands, plants are like people. Sometimes they need a fresh start to grow. Lila looked up, hope flickering in her eyes. Do you think I'll be okay? She asked softly. Iris reached out and squeezed her hand. I know you will. You've got your dad and me to help you every step of the way. Lila smiled, the weight of her past starting to lift. For the first time, she believed she could be happy again. Ethan often watched Iris and Lila from the window, grateful for Iris's kindness. She had brought something special into their lives. Hope. Iris's steady friendship also gave Ethan a feeling of connection he hadn't had in years. One evening, Iris invited Ethan and Lila to dinner. They sat around her cozy kitchen table, eating roast and warm bread. Lila laughed, a sweet sound Ethan hadn't heard in so long. Her laughter was a melody of healing. Iris shared stories about her late husband, and Ethan listened intently. Their eyes met, and they shared an understanding. Both had experienced loss, but together they found comfort. With each visit and shared meal, their bond grew. Lila noticed it too. She smiled when she saw her dad and Iris laughing together. Iris had become like family, a safe and loving presence. Spring arrived, and the tulips Iris and Lila had planted began to bloom. The bright flowers reminded Lila of her own journey. How, with love and care, she too was starting to grow. One evening, as the sun set, the three of them sat on the porch. Iris gently rested her hand on Ethan's. He smiled at her, feeling something he hadn't felt in years: happiness. Lila nestled between them, her head resting on Ethan's shoulder. As stars dotted the sky, Ethan wrapped his arm around her, his heart full of gratitude. For the first time, Ethan imagined a future where he, Lila, and Iris could be a family. Not because they were related, but because they chose to love and care for each other. Now, this story is made up, but it's important to remember that some kids, like Lila, face very real struggles at home. Home should be a place of love and safety, but when it's not, it can hurt a child deeply. If you're a parent, remember how much your love and care matter. And if you ever see a child who seems sad or scared, try to help. Together, we can make sure every child feels loved and safe. If you enjoyed this story and would like to see more content like it, I encourage you to subscribe to my channel. By subscribing, you'll stay updated on all our latest, inspiring and heartwarming stories and have the opportunity to engage with our growing community. Additionally, I would love to hear your thoughts and feedback in the comment section below. Thank you for your support, and I look forward to sharing more captivating narratives with you.